Dear Rachel, I get the "you're such a great guy" speech more than I'd like to admit. I have good conversations, I listen, I try to be emotionally available, but I still somehow end up in the friend zone. Am I supposed to be an asshole? And why am I always attracted to the girls who seem to prefer them? Ooh, so this question came from a listener, and it hits hard, right? Whether you're a man who's been on the receiving end of the friend zone or a woman who's also felt rejected for being too quote unquote sweet, this question resonates with all of us. And what we really want to know is, do nice guys and gals really finish last? Because the truth is, a lot of us spend years dating the wrong people. Not because we're too nice or not assertive enough, but because we haven't yet done the work to understand what we truly want and to heal the patterns that keep leading us into mismatched relationships. Now, as someone who's been on the giving and receiving end of too nice, I cannot wait to get into this one. Throw out the rules, forget the cliches. This isn't about the perfect profile or the perfect date. It's about real connection. It's time to strip away the masks, shed the stories, and drop those old patterns that no longer serve you. Tired of dating advice that doesn't fit? So are we. Welcome to Stripped, Drop Your Patterns, where conscious dating isn't about following a script. It's about embracing your whole self and attracting the kind of love that sets your soul on fire. I'm Rachael J., the connection coach and your host. Let's get real. All right, so before we get into our listener question, let's start with why we often pick incompatible partners early on. Now, when we're younger or less experienced in relationships, we often operate on what feels familiar rather than what's truly aligned with who we are. This can mean chasing excitement or novelty or validation, as we've covered previously, trying to fit societal or cultural expectations, or unconsciously repeating family dynamics and emotional patterns from our past. If you grew up with poor examples of a healthy love relationship, then you may unconsciously attract partners with similar traits or behaviors as those early relationship role models, and even end up in a carbon copy of a relationship that you never aspired to be in. On the other hand, growing up in that same environment, you might push away or sabotage any healthy presenting connection because you're actually afraid of it working out and eventually devolving into the mirror image of that modeled relationship that, again, you never aspired to have for yourself. Neither men nor women are immune to this. Our early dating experiences are essentially an ongoing science experiment where the variables have no profound impact on the outcome because the constant in the equation is ourself. We're looking in the wrong place if we only change the variables. All right, okay. I can tell that I've been watching a bit too much For All Mankind because I'm trying to get all sciencey here on you. But side note, it's a really good show. It's on Apple TV. Check it out if you have not already. I could go on and on about it. But anyway, okay. Back to the point, which is if we ever want to get off of the hamster wheel that is our love life, we have to tweak the aspects of ourself that keep us in the same patterns with ultimately the same outcomes. So these patterns, which are learned ways of relating to others based on our upbringing and past experiences, can unconsciously sabotage our chances with the right people. Maybe you have a pattern of people pleasing or of chasing unavailable partners or of avoiding conflict. My pattern was in chasing unavailable partners, emotionally and otherwise. I am going to get really real with you, and I hope that the listener who asked the question about being told he's a great guy but constantly being friend-zoned is tuned in for this. Now, I want to be very clear on this. My pattern of unavailable men was not that I set out to break anybody up, and nobody did, for the record. Unavailable was just who I found myself drawn to, and sadly, who seemed the most drawn to me. It is not a part of my history that I'm proud of, but I also don't feel shame around it because I recognize where this pattern came from, and I have compassion for the young me who had a lot of internal wounds that led to this pattern. So I'm going to share a little bit more with you about this. This pattern started in my teens and continued through my 30s. And having done a lot of work around my patterns many years later, I've come to realize that my attraction to unavailable partners was very layered and very complex. Part of this pattern came from unresolved feelings of abandonment by my biological father, as well as a lack of emotional connection while growing up with my stepdad, who is, by all means, who I consider my dad. Now, part of my pattern also came from being told never to settle by my female role models, and as a result, I associated a healthy partnership early in my adulthood to FOMO, essentially. What if I got locked in early and realized later that there was someone out there who was better for me? This is also a big problem with dating apps, by the way, but I digress. And finally, a big part of my pattern can ultimately be attributed to a fear of heartbreak. Having had my first real heartbreak my second year of college, I knew this was something that I never wanted to experience again. So I suppose that I thought if I knew a connection was doomed from the start, then allegedly my heart was quote unquote protected in some fucked up way, and the risk of getting my heart broken was lower. Yeah, it's ridiculous and it makes no sense, and I absolutely had devastating heartbreaks along the way despite this genius strategy. Shocker, I know. But the point is, I had developed these unconscious protection mechanisms that I wasn't even aware that I had until I did the work to unravel them. For my guy who asked the question, when I was in the thick of my own science experiment, I dated plenty of good, kind men who were attracted to me. Remember my Coke guy who dared to introduce me to his grandma on the first date? If not, go back and listen to episode 1. You'll get a kick out of it. Anyway, it was hard for me to accept that good men would actually want me. Certainly, I had worthiness issues. If you remember back to an earlier episode, this actually may have also been in the first episode when I butchered the Groucho Marx quote that was essentially, I wouldn't want to join any club that would have me as a member. But more than the worthiness issue, based on my varied experiments, I had hypothesized that all men are unfaithful. And that became the narrative that I strove to prove with every experiment that followed. Again, as a way of trying to protect my heart. The nice guys, the good guys, the ones who were vulnerable and showed interest and did everything quote unquote right. Well, they didn't prove my theory, which actually made them more of a risk. Okay, stay with me. Because I could open up, allow them to get close, start to build a life, and get crushed. No, it was much safer for me to open my heart to individuals who would definitely crush me rather than those who might someday crush me. And notice that I had discounted any possibility for a scenario in which I don't get crushed and we ride off into the sunset. I mean, come on, limiting belief much? So on the flip side of this, there were also plenty of times in this vicious cycle that I saw good men with women who were awful to them. One in particular who comes to mind, whose wife completely took advantage of him in every possible way. In this instance and others, the woman the good man chose was a bitch. Several times I was told by male friends in these types of relationships, oh, Rachel, if I was single, ... Okay, raise your hand if you've ever heard that before. I know it's meant to be a compliment, but it doesn't feel good. Just like when someone asks, why are you still single? We may need to get into that a little bit in a future episode because now's not the time. But again, meant to be a compliment, but does not feel fucking good. So the if I was single, I'd snatch you up line felt patronizing, and it just fed the parallel narrative that I had, which was that men just want bitches. But of course, the men who follow this pattern are working with their own set of circumstances and experiences that led them to seek such gnarly partners. So you see, dear listener, the knife cuts both ways. Therefore, healing these patterns is powerful because it shifts not only your behaviors, but also your energy and the kinds of people you attract. It's why, once you start this inner work, you often find yourself open to people that you never thought you'd consider before. And those people tend to be more compatible, more real, and more fulfilling. After you've done work around identifying your patterns, lovingly and compassionately dissecting them to discover the origin and intentions of them, it's time to rewrite your hypothesis and run a fresh experiment. So one of the biggest shifts happens when you get clear on what you truly value in a partner and in a relationship. This clarity is more than just surface preferences like hobbies or looks. It's about values, emotional needs, communication styles, and how you want to be treated and treat others. This is one of the areas that I love to guide my clients with. I've spoken about it before, and it's the ideal partner exercise. It's where you can really dream big and set your vision high on what is important to you and what would fulfill you in a relationship. And when you know clearly what's actually important to you in a partner in a relationship, how you want to feel, and what narratives you're ready to let go of, your choices naturally begin to change. You start setting boundaries, recognizing red flags earlier, and you stop trying to force connections that don't feel right. So here's my little disclaimer though. This is not an overnight change once you do the work. You will be tested more than once along the way. The universe wants to know that you are serious and committed to changing the narrative and that you are not going to slip back into the old familiar patterns. But it is so worthwhile to do the work. And you will 100% continue getting clarity about your ideal partner along the way. I have been through this myself. Once I started doing the inner work, I noticed my attraction shifted and I was no longer drawn to the same old types or stuck in those cycles. Instead, I opened myself to new possibilities, matches that fit me on a deeper level, not just a surface one. And I was more clear and specific on my dating profiles about who I am and what I was looking for, rather than trying to fit a persona that would get attention, but ultimately not be a match. It seems so obvious now, but that was my moment of shifting from seeking validation to seeking a real connection. And this shift changed everything. My beloved asked me early in our relationship, and sometimes still even, where were you 20 years ago? And I say to him, my love, I wouldn't have been ready for you then. You see, he is one of the good ones. He is kind and vulnerable and patient. He's hardworking, honest, and reliable. He loves fully and without reservation. And there is no fucking way I would have been interested in him 20 years ago. I had a lot of work to do. As did he. He had his own journey, which I won't divulge here. And we met at a point in our lives when we could be our best for each other. Sometimes we don't know what we want most until we've had a whole lot of what we don't want. So if you're wondering, am I too nice? Or why do I keep ending up in the friend zone? The answer might be simpler and also more complex than you think. But generally, it's not about you being more or less of anything. It's that we all have these subconscious or unconscious patterns running in the background that inform our dating decisions. If you're the person who finds yourself attracting or dating the same type of quote-unquote bad boy or bitch over and over, hoping that this time he will keep his commitments or this time she'll appreciate the date you planned, ask yourself, how is this pattern serving me? There must be a perceived benefit, or else you would have broken the pattern already. For me, the perceived benefit of involvement with unavailable men was safeguarding my heart. Again, it's bass-ackwards, but that was my logic at the time. So ask yourself, how is this pattern serving me? And if you're the one on the receiving end, constantly being told, you're great, but ask yourself, why am I drawn to individuals who don't see me for how great I truly am? Because this is also a pattern, and it's worth your scientific dissection. For example, if you grew up with emotionally distant parents, you might be drawn to partners who are unavailable or hard to read because it feels normal. Or if you've learned to put everyone else's needs first, you might choose partners who take more than they give. So once you finish with your scalpel, it's about getting clear on what you truly want, stripping the patterns that keep steering you wrong, and being willing to open to new kinds of connections. That is how you move from frustration to freedom, and from the friend zone to the right zone. I hope that you all got something useful out of today's episode, and I would love to hear your takeaways in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast so that your dating pool gets wider and filled with conscious daters like yourselves. Now, I referenced episode 1 several times today, so if you haven't listened to that, I would encourage you to check it out. The title is, Am I Looking for Love or Comfort? And to my guy who was courageous to ask the question that sparked this episode, thank you for having the courage to do so, for showing up, and for being you. If you wrote in the question, or if today's episode struck a chord, I would love to explore your patterns further and the ways I might be able to help you strip them down and attract the love that you are seeking. In the show notes, you'll see the links for my free meetup group for men, where I hold monthly events to answer your dating questions, as well as a link to schedule a no-obligation kickoff call, where we can come up with a plan for you to get in the game. There's also a link to my email, so keep those questions coming. And finally, a link to my free download, Speed Dating Survival Guide for Men, a quick, no-fluff guide to successful speed dates. Until next time!